Get the power to do more with storable software. More automating, more control, more revenue, more time back in your day. Storable helps operators do more with the most powerful technology in self-storage. Learn more at storable.com/do more.
All right, let's get started. So good morning, everybody. So my name is Matt Beal, and I'm a product marketing manager here at Storable, and I'm going to be your host for the 4 Operator Imperatives webinar series. And before we get into today's content, we want to start with an overview of that series. So 2 weeks ago, we hosted an operator roundtable to finish out our discussion on our first operator imperative, which was optimizing your marketing spend. And we were really excited to welcome both Rahim Amir of Devon Self-Storage and then Melissa Stiles of Storage Asset Management, who both carry with them an incredible amount of both industry knowledge, but also just kind of some wealth of creative insights into how they've led their respective companies through the COVID-19 health crisis. And so during that session, we discussed what these individuals are doing to set up their business for success coming out of the health crisis, but also beyond. And we also discussed kind of what trends in consumer behavior are here to stay versus what are a little bit more temporary during this crazy time. So if you guys missed that roundtable, you can find a recording at blog.storable.com, and I'd highly recommend you go give it a listen. But today we're going to be opening a new chapter of the 4 operator imperatives, and in particular, we're going to be discussing this concept of rethinking the tenant experience. And the idea behind today's conversation is that the needs and preferences of your customers, they've already been shifting over the last couple of years more towards digital formats. But the COVID-19 health crisis has really rapidly accelerated those trends. And so we're going to be discussing the tools and the best practices that operators have available to them to be able to meet those evolving consumer needs. And then in 2 weeks, we're going to be hosting another operator roundtable. We commonly hear these are your guys' favorites, to be able to hear from one another how you're kind of actually bringing some of this insight to life and what technology people are using and how it actually looks on their website. And so we're going to have the similar one on the topic of rethinking the tenant experience, so the stuff that we'll be discussing today. And so we have some really great operators lined up who are going to be walking us through some of the innovations that they've been implementing to meet those digital preferences of customers. So be on the lookout for an email from us probably about middle of next week, where we'll be sharing some more details on that conversation. And so let's start today by diving into kind of the market forces that have led us to this webinar series and why we should be caring about things like these 4 operator imperatives. So first up is in 2013, 14, and 15, in the storage industry, operators were seeing some really unprecedented revenue and NOI growth. And this attracted a lot of developers that were trying to take advantage of the fact that they could build at a 9 or a 10 cap rate. They could then stabilize those facilities and sell at a 6 cap rate. And you can see that pretty strongly here in this construction value put in place chart over here off to the right. But as a result of that, we saw the largest development cycle in the industry's history, trailing that, right? So from 2015 to 18, and we were seeing over 1,000 new builds hit the market annually. That's a ton. And so, starting in 2019, as you can see here, we started to see that consumer demand wasn't quite keeping up with that growth in supply. So operators were having to kind of figure out how to be more efficient with both their operations and marketing efforts. And the COVID-19 health crisis really only further accelerated what was already there. And we don't believe that this is doom and gloom. Don't get us wrong. I mean, after all, the self-storage industry has really continued to perform well relative to many other industries throughout this crisis. But we still need to just be thinking about these and what this means for our businesses. And so challenges kind of remain, and to be able to help you guys navigate those challenges, that's why we started this webinar series, the 4 operator imperatives. And the idea is to provide you with a framework that prepares you to combat the market forces, put your business in a position of strength, again, outside of just the health crisis, but really beyond past that. So each of these imperatives and their components came from countless conversations that we've had with our clients, with vendors, with subject matter experts. And they're really at the core of how these folks are approaching optimizing both their operational and marketing performance, again, in the face of these market forces that we just went through. So let's take a look at those operator imperatives. The first one is about optimizing your marketing spend. And we spent the last couple months talking through this one in detail. So again, if you go to blog.storable.com, you can check out some of the conversations we had here. But from a high level, we had some conversations on SEO, PPC, listings management, reputation management, and then the roundtable that I alluded to from a couple weeks ago, where we really talked about how folks are getting creative and bringing these things to life. But today's conversation is going to kick off our new chapter, and that's rethinking the tenant experience. So we're going to be discussing 4 key steps that you can take to ensure that you're meeting those evolving needs of your customers. But over the next couple of weeks, we're also going to be transitioning our discussion over to the third operator imperative, which is simplify and automate processes. And the idea here is that it'll free you up to be able, you and your team up, to focus on driving value to your business in a variety of other ways, such as, demand gen or optimizing processes, et cetera. And then the last one we'll be discussing is amplifying your operating revenue. So to offset that lack of demand, or maybe you're having to decrease prices to drive demand, there's a whole slew of ways that you can provide valuable services to your clients that can also produce ancillary revenue streams. And so we'll be diving into that. But let's get into today's conversation. I'm excited to be joined by Nico Stoenescu. He is my colleague on the product marketing team here at Storable as well. And Nico in particular is uniquely equipped to provide some insights on, many of the digital engagement channels that we're going to be discussing, including our marketing websites, multi-channel tenant communications. So welcome, Nico. We're glad to have you. Would you mind telling the audience a little bit about kind of who you are and your background?
Yeah, of course. First off, thanks for asking me to join you today. This is an important topic to discuss, and from my experience, it's one that operators always want to learn more about, so I'm happy to help where I can. All right, so like Matt said, my name is Nico Stoenescu, Product Marketing Manager here at Storable, and specifically my area of expertise is Storable's demand solution, which is made up of Storable websites and the Sparefoot marketplace. I've been with Storable for about 1.5 years, and before that, I've worked at various tech companies here in Austin, both in technical and customer-facing roles.
Thank you, sir. Well, let's jump into today's conversation then. As we discussed a moment ago, the COVID-19 health crisis has really forced consumers to, frankly, rapidly shift towards forms of digital engagement. And so there's been a lot of businesses across the country that have had to quickly respond, and the storage industry is no exception to this. But where it gets interesting, though, in my opinion, is, a good number of folks that we've been talking to are really thinking of this shift as a temporary one, this shift towards digital engagement. But we don't even believe that that's remotely true, frankly, and we're not alone. So there's a quote I wanted to share with everybody today. So back in late April, during an earnings call, Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, he delivered an incredibly powerful quote, and this is only a piece of it here. But again, this was during an earnings call where he said, we've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months. And what he went on to say, but I didn't want to put all of these words on the slide, is, from remote teamwork to learning to sales to customer service to critical cloud infrastructure and security, we are working alongside customers every day to help them adapt and stay open for business in a world of remote everything. And so, we've been trying our best to reinforce the implications of this quote on the storage industry throughout our webinar series over the last few months, because we believe it is that critical for operators. Your customers are going to continue demanding and expecting more of these digital experiences over the next couple of years. And all the COVID-19 health crisis has done is really pulled that timeline forward. But the reality is, at least to a very strong degree, these trends are here to stay. And so today's conversation is very much focused around that. And as we think of kind of how that comes to life for the storage industry in particular, operators need to be thinking about the fundamentals of customer engagement, as well as improving the tenant experience. And so in particular, we have 4 immediate opportunities that emerge in this space for operators. And we're going to be discussing each in detail. First is this concept of online reservations and move-ins. And the idea is that as more and more of your customers are utilizing these digital channels to shop, you're going to need to make sure that your website is equipped to meet those needs. And so visitors have to have a way to reserve and pay for their unit online directly without coming into your store. Next is staff availability and fast service. And this one seems like a simple one at first glance for sure. It's simple, right? Your staff needs to be there to greet walk-ins. They need to be able to communicate with customers in a variety of ways. And they need to ensure leads and tenants are getting the help both when and where they need it. But what maybe isn't so obvious about this one is getting ahead of those needs and being able to proactively address them before the customer even knows they have concerns. And so the digital landscape, especially your marketing website, is a great way to be able to deliver on that promise. And we're going to be discussing some best practices today on how you can make that happen. Next is account management. And this one is all about empowering your tenants with a convenient online self-service portal where they can access account information, pay their bills, and manage other relevant interactions with your facility. And then lastly, we'll be discussing multi-channel tenant communications. And so You're also going to be able, you're going to need to be able to deliver one-off or automated communications to your customers where they prefer to communicate with you, right? Whether that is email, SMS, social media, physical mail, there's a whole lot of different ways you can go about it, but you're going to need to make sure you're equipped to do all of them. So we'll discuss this one as well. But first, we're going to jump into online reservations and move-ins. So Nico, why don't you start us off with a conversation here?
Yeah, glad to. So if you weren't already committed to providing an online move-in experience before the health crisis, it's now absolutely critical that you do so. During this time of contactless experiences, online shopping has spiked in popularity, and a recent survey found that the average American consumer is spending on average 10 to 30% more online than before the health crisis. And the storage industry is not immune to these trends. On the Square Foot Marketplace, we've seen an average 14% increase in reservations made year over year in June and July. And while this trend might eventually regress a bit, more realistically, this is a pull forward of future customer behavior. Far and away, though, your most effective tool in creating these online experiences is going to be a powerful marketing website. Specifically, you'll want to check for the following capabilities: real-time syncing between your management software and website to ensure that your inventory, pricing, promotions are always up to date. Nothing will ruin a move-in quicker than the person realizing that a deal was too good to be true. Online reservation and move-in module to guide the customer through the reservation and move-in process. If the customer can see your units but not book them, there's a good chance they're going to check out one of your competitors' websites before calling you. It's also worth noting that you should evaluate any ancillary marketing services that you use for this same functionality. And then integrated payments and e-sign to close the deal while you have them interested. If a customer makes a reservation but doesn't complete the move-in process, that's an opportunity for them to second guess themselves and continue shopping. If you can have them sign their lease and take their payment, it's a strong sign that they'll move in with you. In addition to your website, though, there's a variety of other situations where you might need to enable your tenants to move in online. For example, some management softwares empower you to send online move-in links out to your customers on an ad hoc basis. There's a couple of cases for this type of capability. First, we've heard some operators using this technology to facilitate contactless move-ins for what would be a traditional walk-in. Instead of letting folks into the office, you can field their questions via phone while they wait outside and then email them an online move-in link. Additionally, you can set up automation rules to trigger sending of an online move-in link. For example, if one of your marketing sources allows customers to just make a reservation instead of a move-in, you can set up automation to email them suggested next steps, including a link to your online move-in process. Another example, and a quick shameless plug, is the Square Foot Marketplace now offers these online move-ins that directly input into your management software.
Thank you, Nico. Yeah, so that's our first bucket. And so the next one we want to get into is this concept of staff availability and fast service. And so, as I mentioned before, there's some obvious elements to this for sure. You just need people available to meet the needs of your consumers, but we're going to be focusing today on some of the less obvious stuff. And so before I get into this topic, though, I do want to call out today's content. We oriented specifically around folks that are running manned facilities. We did do a webinar a couple of months ago on kind of making the case for usage of automation. And in particular, if people do want to go as to the extreme of unmanned facilities, that is an option. We included some best practices on how you can make that work and had some experts in the field come share kind of some of those best practices as well. So if you want to check that out, I would recommend you go to blog.storable.com. But for a majority of the folks out there, we're still running some variant of actual manned facilities with staff on site. And so today's conversation will be more focused around that. But the storage industry in particular has really historically heavily relied on in-person customer service as a differentiator amongst their competitors. And so when a majority of your customers discovered your business while driving by or walking in, this made a ton of sense. And to be clear, it still remains critical as a customer, as your customers' preferences are shifting, more and more towards digital forms in particular. But you're just going to need to think about kind of how that looks in the new world. And so first is we want to suggest to you guys that one of the best ways to get ahead of your customers, questions or problems is to proactively communicate everything that they need, right? An educational experience on your website. If you can teach them everything that they need for their move-in during the online move-in flow, for example, they won't ever even have a need to reach out to your staff. And especially during the health crisis, when you may or may not have staff available at your location at any given time, this one is really critical. And if you're not sure exactly what you should be thinking about communicating with them proactively, because frankly, this is going to differ from facility to facility. Everybody's got some unique nuances to their move-in flow or to the way that they get their gate code or, whatever the case may be. We recommend that you ask your managers. There's definitely no doubt that your manager is going to know, what are the most common reasons that people are calling or asking questions or emailing in. And so by understanding what those unique needs are, you can get ahead of those unique needs by putting them on the website during that online move-in flow. And during the health crisis, especially when you're probably making a large amount of changes to your business processes, more than you normally would, this one is particularly important. And so, for example, we do recommend including detailed instructions of your, of your contactless move-in flow, for example, during the online move-in process. And that way your tenants won't need to come into the office and ask you how to proceed. And this screenshot in particular, I wanted to share with you guys. This actually came from our operator roundtable 2 weeks ago, where Melissa Stiles of Storage Asset Management shared this with us. But it's a fantastic example of how they've built this instructional material into their website so that customers know everything that they need to expect. And you can see here, they even went as far as to create a video so that they can walk you through, how to interact with the website, where to click, what to expect, what are those next steps. So this is a really great example. And they've talked a lot, she in particular talked a lot about, how successful this has been for them and setting their tenants up for success. But even after the crisis, keeping folks plugged into changes you're making at your facility via either email or SMS is really going to be key to give them the confidence that they're storing at the right facility. And it's very much a win-win in that kind of case. And so this is like a good example of, what an automated text message might look like when someone completes an online move-in. They get this email or they get this text as soon as they've completed it. And now they know what their gate code is. They got where instructions for their unit is, what a phone number is if they need to give somebody a call. But you can imagine everyone's got a phone in their pocket. And so having these instructions immediately in front of you as soon as you've completed a move-in is incredibly valuable for those tenants. And so next up, I want to pass it back over to Nico. He's going to be walking us through our next concept, which is online account management. So Nico, take it away.
Okay, so once your new tenant has physically moved into your facility, it's equally important that you meet their needs by creating a digital account management experience as well. On top of satisfying your customer, this experience can also reduce the operational burden on your team. If your managers aren't having to work with your customers on their existing accounts, they can focus on providing value back to your business in a variety of other ways, such as driving new business or optimizing various tasks and processes at the facility. So there are a few things your account management experience will need to accommodate. Managing account info, such as the customer's address, phone, email. There's no reason for your managers to be spending time on basic data entry. And your customers don't want to wait on the phone or come into the store to update this. Viewing unit info or documents. In case your customers need to remind themselves what they're paying or to review the signed docs such as leases, they can do so with the click of a button. Signing new documents. Maybe you updated your lease or you need them to fill out an auto pay agreement. And whatever the document is, it's critical that you have an account management portal that facilitates these signatures without the customer having to come into the facility. And then auto pay. Speaking of auto pay, this is a huge value add for both operators and their customers. Some benefits such as convenience are obvious, but there are some not so obvious benefits as well. For example, automatic payments are typically significantly more secure than processing payments otherwise. By eliminating the middleman between you and your customer, you can significantly reduce your risk. So you need to get away from writing down credit card numbers. Adding units, merchandise, or services. Do you offer various merchandise or services such as tenant insurance to your customers? Because if you do, you should strongly consider allowing your tenants to engage with these offerings via an account management portal. If you can help a tenant realize that they're going to need something before they need it, there's a significantly higher chance that they'll purchase it from you. Convenience for them, revenue for you, another win-win.
Thank you, Nico. Very good. So lastly, guys, we got one more topic we wanted to discuss today, which is this concept of multi-channel tenant communications. So operators really need to provide as many channels for communication as possible. And I know I alluded to that before, but the reality is each and every one of your customers has unique needs, and those needs are changing all the time. And depending on where they are in their customer life cycle, they might want to engage with you in a different, using a different channel, whether that's a phone when they're out and about, a computer when they're at home. But there's four main channels that we're going to be discussing today. So first is phone. And so while most operators have probably been using phone as part of their communication mix for, quite some time, if not their entire time, how you use it is key. So for example, what happens if you or your manager need to step away from the phone? Or in the case of a health crisis, for example, what if you're temporarily managing your business remotely? There are some things that we recommend that you do. So for example, you can set up call forwarding to make sure that your calls go to your mobile device instead of the landline that would normally be at the facility. This is something that your management software can often facilitate. But after all, if you don't field your customer's first call, there's a pretty good chance you're going to lose them and they're going to contact one of your competitors. And we don't want that happening. Next up is two-way SMS or email, text messaging or email. And so email is another common form of communication that most operators are probably already using, but SMS is a little bit less likely used. And if you're not using SMS, I'm here to tell you you're missing out on a huge opportunity. And so in fact, a recent study, and this was before the COVID-19 health crisis, showed that 63% of customers would switch to an otherwise equal company if that other company offered SMS as a communication channel. So that's incredibly powerful. There's some other stats out there where 90-some-odd% of people are using SMS on any given day, right? It's where so many people naturally are gravitating towards. It's incredibly convenient. It's your phone in your pocket. It's just one that you need to be communicating with your tenants with. But for both SMS and email, I do want to point out that the two-way aspect of these capabilities is critical. And what we mean by two-way is that if the customer responds to your message, you have to have an easy way to see their response and reply in near real time very quickly. And not every provider out there offers this. It seems like it might be a pretty apparent thing, but it is something that you need to make sure that you check off when you're shopping for vendors on text message. So next up is chat. And so at this point, I think, most folks have probably seen this technology in action just in their personal lives when they're shopping online. But I don't think a lot of storage facilities, at least as I've browsed a lot of, people's marketing websites, have really started to adopt this one. But the idea is that you have a built-in chat window directly on your website that is usually accompanied by some form of logic that forces it to pop up when your customer is shopping so that they can get their questions answered. So for example, if you're on a storage website and you're looking at the units page and it's been 30 seconds and they haven't clicked on anything or they haven't moved forward, you can have a chat window pop up for them to say, hey, do you have any questions about this? What can I answer for you to make sure that you feel like you're making the right decision? And so, as you might imagine, having that in real time is incredibly valuable for them. But how you respond to those chat messages is typically handled in one of two ways. First is you can have your employees manually managing these inbound messages and responding in real time. And if you remember that stat about SMS just a moment ago, that same study found that 72% of customers are more likely to purchase from a website communicating with them about their products in real time with a real employee via chat messaging. So that's really compelling as well. But alternatively, if you can't spare the time to manage those responses in real time, or maybe you're asking a lot of your managers and they're also out doing some various tasks around the facility and they can't be there to respond in real time, you can use what are known as chatbots. And these bots are powered by AI, right? Which just means that over time, they're learning the type of questions that your customers are asking. They're learning the type of answers that you're giving those customers. They're pulling information from your website to do that. And they can help address customer questions without any form of human interaction. And so these are getting more and more impressive by the day. I know for a fact some of you have rolled your eyes when you heard this because we've all had that awkward experience where a chatbot doesn't do a great job, but they are getting significantly better. And when your customer needs an answer quick, they're an incredibly powerful tool in your toolkit. So lastly is the other channel I wanted to talk about is social media, a pretty light one here. But out of the four communication channels, this is probably the least utilized in the storage industry. And I think that's fair. Compared to the other three, I would rank this the fourth most important. But it is just important to note that customers more and more now are engaging with businesses via social media. And the idea is that by visiting for example, if you have a Facebook profile, your customers can send you messages on that Facebook profile. And if you don't respond to it, then that's probably not a great experience. So it is something you do want to at least make sure you're monitoring and that you're responding to people there. And so similar to kind of what we discussed with chat, you want to make sure that you're equipped to respond to those concerns, those questions. If they decide to contact you that way, the faster the better. And so make it at least a habit of checking this a couple times a day just to make sure. You could also set it up to where, if the account is set up on your phone, it'll automatically pop up as soon as you get a message, very similar to a text, so you can respond to them back in real time. And so in summary, today that we discussed 4 main opportunities in front of operators to be able to meet these evolving needs of customers. And so the first one Nico walked us through is online reservations and Moveins, where we discussed how you can make sure that your website is equipped to meet those customer needs, including having visitors, be able to reserve and pay for the unit online directly without coming into the store. But we also discussed staff availability and fast service. And so again, the obvious part is you just need people to be able to respond in real time. But the not so obvious is that we want to make sure that you're building proactive educational experiences onto the website so that you're meeting their needs and you're being able to provide that very fast service before they even realize they would have some sort of issue. So next is account management, where we discussed how you can empower your tenants with a convenient online self-service account management experience where they can access account info, pay their bills, manage other relevant interactions with your facility. And lastly was multi-channel tenant communications, where you're going to either need to deliver one-off or automated communications to your customer on the preferred communications channel, whether that is email, social media, SMS, physical mail, whatever the case may be. But that concludes today's webinar. So Nico, I did want to thank you for joining us today. We really do appreciate you coming to share your knowledge and insights with us.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to be here, and this stuff is important to discuss. And Matt, I'm always happy to help out. So appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Very much. Well, unfortunately, guys, we don't have enough time for Q&A today. We're right up on it with time, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time today. We had a couple questions come in, so don't worry. I've got your email addresses, so I'll be following up with you personally and getting you guys some answers to those questions. But I did really quick before I let you guys go. Wanted to give you guys a quick reminder that in 2 weeks, we're going to be hosting another operator roundtable. And again, we hear from operators, this is, a very popular format from you guys. And so we will be discussing kind of the topics today, which we realize were very, high level and theoretical. But at this roundtable, what we're excited about is that we're going to be able to hear from these operators about how they're actually bringing this to life and how they're implementing all these various concepts you heard today to be able to meet those digital needs and preferences of your customers. So be on the lookout for an email with us for more details, probably about the middle of next week. But that concludes today's webinar. So if you guys do have any questions that come up, please feel free to send us an email at webinars@storable.com. But to everybody out there, please stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks for our next webinar. But thanks for attending and have a great day.
Get the power to do more with storable websites. More marketing, more engagement, more customers moving into your facility. Storable helps operators do more with the most powerful technology in self-storage. Learn more at storable.com/do more.